afternoon. You're watching the English newscast on Future Television. I'm Yumna Naufal, and these are today's top stories. Al-Kaz residents paid tribute to the northeastern border town's residents that were killed in a series of suicide attacks on June 27th. Sporadic clashes hit the southern edges of Aleppo in Syria hours after rebels say they have broken a 3-week government siege. And Iran officially announces it has executed a nuclear scientist convicted of handing over top-secret information to the United States. Good afternoon to all those who are tuning in. Al-Kaz residents in Lebanon paid tribute to the northeastern border town's residents that were killed in a series of suicide attacks on June 27th. It was quoted as saying that every martyr who died to defend his land is a saint in heaven, and the sorrow must turn into joy because the martyrs are intercessors for Lebanon. The words of priest Ilyan Nasrallah in a sermon in the town's Mar Ilyas church during a mass marking 40 days since their death, a common tradition here in Lebanon. A memorial was erected in the town's main square outside the church with a sign reading June 27, 2016 Heroes. Al-Qa, located only a few kilometers away from the Syrian border, was rocked by 8 suicide bombings in the morning and evening of that June 27th. While 5 people died in the morning attack, no casualties took place in the evening. Although no one claimed responsibility for the bombings, it is suspected that Daesh was behind the attacks. Sporadic clashes hit the southern edges of Aleppo in Syria, according to a monitoring group, hours after rebels said they had broken a 3-week government siege of the Syrian city. An alliance of rebels late on Saturday said they had opened a new route into Aleppo's eastern neighborhoods, home to some 250,000 people. But the road, which passes through southern edges of the city, remains too dangerous for civilians to use, according to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, which relies on witnesses on the ground. On Saturday, anti-regime groups overran a series of buildings and a military academy on the southwestern edges of Aleppo. And rebels posted footage of their fighters embracing and celebrating the end of the government encirclement in place since July 17th. Houthi rebels and forces loyal to former President Ali Abdullah Saleh in Yemen appointed a council set up to govern the new country in a blow to UN-mediated peace talks. The announcement comes as the United Nations preps to suspend peace talks in Kuwait. The rebel alliance announced the creation of the council on July 28th, a move denounced by Yemen's internationally recognized government. UN envoy Ismail Oud Sheikh Ahmed said it would damage the talks and represented a grave breach of UN Security Council Resolution 2216. The talks began on April 21 but broke down last month when the rebels rejected a UN peace plan, saying any settlement must include the formation of a unity government. Iran officially announced it has executed a nuclear scientist convicted of handing over top-secret information to the United States. This is according to a judicial spokesman. Shahram Amiri was hanged for revealing the country's top secrets to the enemy. Ghulam Hussein Mohseni was quoted as saying by the Mizan online news site. Amiri disappeared in Saudi Arabia in June 2009 and resurfaced a year later in the United States. Iranian officials welcomed him on his return to Iran, but there has been little information released since. Amiri said after returning to the Republic that he had been held in the U.S. for more than a year after being kidnapped at gunpoint by 2 Farsi-speaking CIA agents in the Saudi city of Medina. Tehran and Washington have had no diplomatic ties since 1980, when students stormed the American embassy following the 1979 Islamic Revolution. Coming up next, Donald Trump ends a tough week for his campaign in the state that launched him toward the presidential nomination. Stay with us, we'll be right back. Welcome back. Donald Trump ended a tough week for his campaign in the state that launched him toward the presidential nomination, and he did what Republicans have been urging him to do: keep the focus on Democrat Hillary Clinton. Trump's victory in the February 10th Republican primary in New Hampshire put him in position to win the party's nomination, but he trails Clinton in the state by 15 points in the latest poll, 47 to 32. Trump came to New Hampshire after a troubled week in which he tangled with fellow Republican leaders and sparred verbally with the parents of a Muslim soldier who died fighting for the United States in Iraq in 2004.
You know, the writers gave her a word. Let's use temperament for Trump. Let's use I've always had a great temperament. And you know, I win. I have a winning temperament. We're going to win. We're going to start winning again. But I've won. My life has been about winning. I win. She can't win. She's not a winner. She can't win. But somebody said, oh, let's attack, because the subject can't be on her, because she's been such a failure. So they came up with the word temperament. You know, it's interesting. A while ago, they used the word tone. And she said, this was a while, she said, I don't like, as she's reading her teleprompter, I don't like Donald Trump's, wait a minute, tone. I don't like Donald Trump's tone. I think I have a good tone. I think I have a good tone. The $400 million in cash was for the hostages, folks. The same day, one of the hostages, and maybe by now all of them, said they waited hours and hours and hours, I guess, at the airport because they were waiting for something. I think he said they were waiting for a plane to come in. The plane had $400 million in cash. Who has the right to authorize something like that? And then Obama said, well, we had to do it in cash because we didn't have a working relationship with Iran, even though they've been negotiating with them for years. And they had no accounts. So they gave $400 million in cash. Folks.
Spanish ambassador to Lebanon, Ms. Milagros Hernando Echevarria, spoke about the challenges during her mandate since 2012 that include the loss of soldier Francisco Javier Soria Toledo from UNIFIL. He had been serving and was killed by an Israeli shell that hit the post near the Hajar village. This is part 2 of our interview.
We are Spain. We are very proud about the things that we are doing, because in my 4 years here, for example, from the first day I arrived here on the 4th July 2012, 10 days later I was in Marjayun just for one of the ceremonies. From this day I see every day all the little villages, and I see the big one, I see Nabatille, and I think peace is great in development. That's why it was very sad, very, very sad. They understood that sometimes these are the consequences, terrible consequences of the lack of dialogue about two countries. And if you ask me, I will be very happy if one day Lebanon and the neighbor Israel, they are able to say, well, we are here, we are going to continue to be here, and we are going to establish peace.
It's a hope, I know, for a lot of people here. You know, we've mentioned some, I'm sure what was probably one of the most biggest challenges that you've had to face when you're here. But there have been much better times, and much nicer things that you have been able to establish, specifically when it comes to bilateral relations between Spain and Lebanon. Anything that stands out when you look back on these 4 years?
Well, first thing, perhaps the most important thing for me, you know, when you are in Europe, even or in Spain, even if I was dealing with Lebanon and I was here before working 3-4 times, I think the most important thing is just to be able to know the Lebanese society and to admire the positive things you have inside this society.
What are they? People keep talking about these positive things. Nobody believes there are positive things.
Yeah, but you have to believe on this. Why? First, you are a society that you are not frightened about foreigners. On the contrary, I mean, you make us feel like we are at home. You love foreigners, perhaps because your history, because the story of the consuls, because all the Mediterranean dynamics after 15th century. all these things. But let's say that you are happy when foreigners are here. And this is very important because you feel that this society is always open, ready to share with us your knowledge, your thoughts, your reflections, your families, your places. And this is an important value for a country. Secondly, I think when you are in one country like Lebanon, you try or you are able to understand, let's say, the history of the country, the history of the region, but without cliches. We have a lot of stereotypes and a lot of cliches when we are working outside. And I have to say thank you, because you, Lebanese people, you allow me to know much more about this society, and mainly to say goodbye to these stereotypes and to these cliches.
That's very lovely to hear. I hope everybody. I'll make sure everybody actually listens to this.
Yeah, sure. And you are in a society with a terrible energy, of course, with difficult times in your history, but with very positive moments in your history too. I mean, both things, not only terrible things.
Mrs. Ambassador, I want to end on one question, because the president of the IE Alumni Association in Lebanon, Mr. Dr. Tabi Wa'il Kishli, we were talking about this. In the last 15 years, we noticed an increase of number of Lebanese students traveling to Spain, specifically IE, which is one of the top 15 business schools in Lebanon. The alumni is huge here, 500 people and growing. What is it you think, you know, we talk about foreigners in Lebanon, what do you think makes Lebanese specifically choose to have, and why do they choose to have an education in Spain?
Yeah, perhaps Wael is much more ready to explain. But, well, let's say what I think. First, this school is a very important school, and of course now when you see the classifications of this type of schools in Europe or in the world, you will see that not only
in ranking,
Instituto de Empresa, this is the name of it Spanish, ESADE, there are another one. Let's say they are between the 1 and the 10, you have 2 Spanish ones. Well, this is important too, because you think perhaps instead of going to France or Paris or London or
Europe,
you prefer to go to Spain. One day, or well, I think this is the first thing, because the level of the school is good. Okay. Secondly, it's true that perhaps Madrid, Barcelona, Spain in general, they are easier. Let's say the society is easier than in other towns, perhaps because they are not so big. Paris is very big, London is very big, others in the States, we are closer. Perhaps our societies are closer to, let's say, when I am here in the street, because I am not able to speak Arabic, or not very good, but let's say, usually you think I am Lebanese because I move the same way that you are moving, and because I dress the same way.
It's the Mediterranean countries.
Perhaps. Let's say that when a Lebanese goes to Spain, immediately is integrated. I mean, nobody thinks he is foreign. I mean, he is, and probably the language is the only perhaps barrier. But if you speak a little bit of Spanish, they are going to help you.
See.
Yeah.
This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our headlines. Akaz residents pay tribute to the northeastern border town residents that were killed in a series of suicide attacks on June 27th. Sporadic clashes hit the southern edges of Aleppo hours after rebels say they have broken a 3-week government siege of the city. And Iran officially announced that it has executed a nuclear scientist convicted of handing over top secret information to the United States. Those are your Sunday headlines live on Future Television. I'm Yumna Nopa signing off. Have a good week.